So in this session, we will talk about the client and server interactions. In the earlier dev session, Amar covered how a FOP actually goes from client to server using the RPCs, and the XDR representation on the wire is also covered in that video. This actually picks up from there. It actually tries to cover the ones that are not covered in that video. Mainly, those are how the server translator actually starts up and sets up these programs that it is going to listen on, how a client connects to a server, what actually happens during that, like what are the messages that get exchanged, that will be covered. And there is a data structure called client_T in server, which actually has the state of that connection. We'll look into that as well. Client disconnection is something that needs to be handled in server because of maybe the machines going down or network flakiness, etc. The client may disconnect with server. In that case, how the resources are cleaned up would be covered. We will also try to cover how the client reconnects to the server after the server comes back up or the network is better after a while. Then in the reconnection process, what happens? This is also something that we will cover. So the first thing that we'll look at is how the server actually sets up the auth and the RPC programs that it is going to support. So we'll try to look at the code and understand. Okay. So this part is in server.c. So in this, after setting up all these mutexes, etc., there is a, so this is called as authorization. So there are different options that you can specify in your server translator configuration, which you can, for each of these auth modules, it will try to initialize the structures that it needs to set up. Once that part is done, it will do something called as RPC SVC init. In this, it will set up RPC SVC auth. There are allow and secure, root squash, and all these options that are related to authorization. It will set them up. Once that part is complete, this is the first program that is getting registered, which is called as dump program. We'll just try to look at what exactly is in this. So this is the program, and the actors that we have are these. So the two actors that we need to look at are RPC SVC dump and RPC SVC print. We will see why these are important when we look at the client connection part of this session. But for now, we'll just see that these are the two actors that are first registered as part of this dump program. After this part is done, it will create listener. So this is something that it has to do so that the server actually can listen on the sockets and all that. It will also set up these RPC notify, which gets called whenever a client disconnects or connects. So it will have these events you have accepted a connection, or there is a disconnect from that connection. there is a transport cleanup also. Yeah. So once all the operations on that connection are over and there are no more references held on to this transport, there will be a transport destroy event that gets called. So that is something that it will set up. After that, different FOP programs it will start setting up. So this is the 3.3, which was the earlier version of the FOPs. At the moment, I think we have 4. Okay, we can actually see these things, like these actors contain, like mknode, mkdir, all the FOPs that we actually use on the file system. They will all be here in the. So this is the actor. This is the program that gets used when client is from an older version which does not have 4.0 version of this model. So then there will be, like, the 4.0 FOP program also, which is the latest version that we have. So there were some on the wire changes that were done when we set these things up. So, but the FOPs are generally same. There could be some extra ones that are only present in 4.0, but yeah. So that is one more program. The other one is the handshake program. So if we look at the actors in handshake, we see that there is something called a set volume, and then there is a get spec. So this is now defunct. This is mainly kept for backward compatibility, I guess. So server get spec is the actor using which we actually get the wall file. But okay, so anyway, so I don't think that we will cover now, but this set volume is something that we'll cover in this session. Okay, so these are the different programs that server will set up so that it can start accepting connections. So when the accelerator is set up as part of the brick process coming up, these are the things that will happen. Okay, now let's go back to the presentation. Now we will look at what the client translator will do to set the connection, to establish a connection with the server translator. So I think this is something that we covered in the earlier sessions, where the client starts connecting to the server on a parent up notification in the graph. So as part of the connection, several things happen. The first thing that it will do is maybe I can show this in a side by side. 1 second. So maybe I'll just cover these things and then we can go back to the client. So these are the auth parts, like auth login, and these are the options that are related to authorization path, authorization address. So these are the authorization related options that get set up in server translator when it is coming up. I'll now move on to the use. If it's okay. All right. Let me see if I no. Okay. So is this visible? What is here?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so basically, when you set up this client translator, the GlusterD would have generated the host name on which the wall file for this particular the port information, etc., would be present, on which GlusterD it would be present. So the client translator knows that it needs to first connect to the GlusterD on this whatever is here, because I'm using like a single machine. It will always be localhost local domain, but in a cluster with multiple machines, this will contain wherever the host name of whichever brick that it needs to, it represents, this client translator represents. So it will first connect to GlusterD on this machine. GlusterD actually runs on a well-known port 24007. So first it connects to GlusterD. Once that connection is successful, it will try to do a dump of these programs, and it will get the information that this particular GlusterD has something called as port map program, which basically contains all the information about which brick is running on which port. So then the client translator will actually send another RPC with this path to that GlusterD and asks for what port is the brick running for the brick that represents this particular path. Then GlusterD will send the response saying this is the port, and then client translator will disconnect from this GlusterD, then connects to this host name and the port that GlusterD has given to establish the connection. So that's what actually happens in the connection path. We will now look at these things in the code, the same flow. So I was saying that the client translator, when the graph gets initialized, would first get this event called parent up, at which I mean, like at that time, this RPC CLNT start is going to be invoked. This always connects to the remote host and 24007. That is what it will do. Once the connection, the socket connection is established between GlusterD on the remote host from this client, then this client RPC notify is invoked with this event called the RPC client has connected. We'll look at the RPC transport and RPC connection in detail in a later session, but for now, let's just assume that call comes here. At this place, client handshake will this process will start getting executed. So what it will do is it will send an RPC which is called as this dump op. Okay, so if we look at it, like, GlusterD implements it, and there is a so there is an RPC SVC dump. So this is the one that is that gets invoked in server translator, and this is the one that gets invoked in GlusterD. So these two servers, because they actually accept connections, they actually accept this RPC, and they respond with what all programs are running in this in their respective processes. So in the response, if the connection is well, etc., we actually get this information about the list of programs that are all running. So we can probably look at this dump response. So we can see that it has this program detail, which is like the program name, program version, etc., etc. Okay. all of these things will be there in a linked list. So you can figure out what all programs are running on that particular server. So what this will do is it will first check whether this server has any port map running. If it has port map, that means it is a luxury. So what it will do now is query the port. So we actually have this remote subvolume, which is nothing but the remote subvolume is nothing but this path, the brick path. Okay, so it gets that string. The transport type is for the TCP or RDMA, these kinds of things also it will handle, but it will make an RPC call to Glustery asking for give a port for the brick. So it will take this brick, and for that brick it will query the port. Once it gets the port successfully, it will do this RPC client reconfig, which will set the probably see this one. The remote port it is going to set whatever we get from the port, and remote host also we don't need to set because it's the same thing, but I think it is setting it. It's fine. Okay. So this one, now the next time the connection happens using this RPC client, it will connect to the brick. So it reset the port and hostname information here, and then it will trigger a disconnect. It will trigger a disconnect so that the next reconnect will happen on the brick. So the first disconnect that it has done with Glustery will lead to this RPC client disconnect. It would have already also set this skip notify. So it will skip the notification, and then it will do a quick reconnect, which is like the connection to brick. So it will trigger a old RPC related things cleanup, and then it will start the connection again. Now the connection will be established with the brick. The same RPC CLNT connect will be this function with that event will be invoked again. So this client handshake, it will again start the client handshake. It will again do the same dump version, but this time it won't get this port map because it is from a brick. It will try to figure out if there are any supported programs. I think initially it will see whether the 3.3 version is present or not. That will be there for all of the older ones also. The newer ones will have all the servers etc. that are after 4.x. Even the authorization related information like the auth values etc. they will be different. This is not an old protocol. So once it sets these up, it will do a set volume with the appropriate on the appropriate program. Set volume is an RPC. If this succeeds, you have resources allocated on the server to do any of the operations that you want to do on this transport. So that's this client translator. That's what set volume means. So it actually has to do set up some options, FOBS versions, management version, and this is something called as a client translator, the client ID, which is unique for a client translator. So it always makes sure that a client ID is unique. So And it also has this information like from which machine it is coming, what is its PID, what is the kind of process, is it like a fuse mount or a self-fill daemon process. Those kinds of information will also be filled in. Client version, etc. The volume ID, etc. These are all informations that will be useful in figuring out what this client represents on the server translator. There are some extra options like whether it's a subdirectory mount or not and stuff like that. Then eventually it will send a request to the server. Okay, we will look at this same what happens on the server for this one. Basically, for this set volume, server underscore set volume is the actor that gets called. What happens here? It will do the auth checks basically. Second, because these are all like error checks and all that. Yeah, so it will. So these are the like this is like the client UID, which is like the client ID. It basically is going to get all of these options that it has passed. The client has passed. And after it gets all of this information, it will do something called as gf underscore client underscore get. This is similar to the other resources that we have in Gluster, which is like inode underscore t or fd underscore t. So we will look at client underscore t in detail a little bit later. But let's just assume that like you have this resource allocated, and it will populate this with the information that the client sent. So once all of these things are set up, it will try to see whether the username password related information is fine. The version checks also are okay or not. This check also will happen. So like all these errors will be propagated if there is any problem. So these are all error checks. After that, okay, so this is something that we do for op version, which I think we will cover in Gluster session. Yeah, so it will try to do an authentication here based on the parameters that this guy has passed, which is like the client version. Yeah, I think it is. So there are these different modules, and for them there are handlers. So it will do auth hello, auth reject, and all of that. After that, if let's say the authentication is successful, then you are like basically done. Once the authentication is successful, now you are going to send a response basically. Let's serialize, look up, and the response properly. I think this is, yeah, so here it is going to send a response that your set volume is successful. So this is what happens on the server translator upon set volume from client. Once this happens, this callback will be invoked. And here, if the op rate is greater than, I think it will be 0. If the op rate is 0, then we are like done. We can start using this transport for sending any of the RPCs like the client translator, we can send any RPCs from parent translators, or even this client translator also can send any of the operations it wants to do. So it will do something called as post handshake, in which it will notify the parent translators that it is up. So this part which happens in the reconnection will cover a bit later. But essentially, it will eventually do a child up to the parent translator, and if quorum number, like depending on the kind of volume we have, this child up propagates to the fuse translator, and now you can start doing your operations. So that's what happens in the child, the connection phase. Okay. All right. Any doubts so far, Arvinda?
Yeah, one question related to the connection timeout. Is there any timeout in the sense client will disconnect after some time, or it will be keep on trying to reconnect? Like if, for example, if only distribute volume and brick goes down, all the bricks goes down.
Oh yeah, that we will cover in just after disconnect. It's going to come. That will be handled. So every 3 seconds it will keep doing a reconnect. That's the short answer, but we will look at that in code also.
And one more question related to authentication. So I didn't see any like snippet for the in the client wall file, like related to authentication.
The client wall file will have, one second. So there is, okay. This is like the one of the what are they called? Okay, so this is a trusted one, right? So this is a trusted one. There are 2 types of client wall files. Okay, so there is a trusted TCP fuse wall. Okay. Like if you try to mount on the same machine, this is the wall file that gets chosen. Okay, this one will just send some username password. Okay. In case of this one also, yeah, there are these username passwords are there. Oh, this is still trusted stuff. 3 is fuse. I think this will be based on this auth hello and auth reject. I think that will be based on the server translator. So we have this cluster volume set auth hello, auth3, auth hello, something like that we can set, right? So it will be based on this information. That's how I remember it. Makes sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. So server translator will do the like authorization for these. So it's okay or not. There probably is a bit more also, but I personally don't remember at the moment if there is anything more. So I know about this username password one. That happens for trusted. For this one, I think it's mostly authalo authorized, but maybe we can ask Amar once. Okay.
Yeah, I'll look into that GF authenticate function.
Yeah. So we'll have to look at that one, I guess. All right. We will look at the disconnection part now. So disconnect can happen for variety of reasons. Even maybe the server process died, or the connection between client and server machine has some problem. Maybe the server machine is rebooting. All these kinds of things can trigger a disconnect. One of the other things is this graph switch on the client also can trigger a disconnect from client to server. Oh yeah, server can also do an auth, like if you change the auth hello, auth reject options, server can disconnect that client upon that after that volume set. If an allowed client becomes a rejected client, it will disconnect. So that also is there. So what will happen on a disconnect? So it's again the same code. It again is client RPC notify. So in this, yeah, so it's the same situation. If there is a disconnect, the RPC notify will be called with this RPC client disconnect event. Upon receiving this event, it first marks all the FDs that are opened on this client translator as bad. So there is a list that is maintained in the translator. It will cycle through all of the FDs and it will mark all of them bad. And from then on, any operations on these FDs in this client translator will give EBADF, like that is bad FD. Once this happens, it will send the parent translator that this accelerator is down. Once that happens, now it will do a so basically, if you remember the previous one, it is changing these ports and host names, right? So here it again changed the remote port to 0. Remote port to 0 will be taken as the cluster D's port. So the RPC client knows that it means it has to connect to 24007. But it basically does a disconnect. What will happen is just notify. So we will have to go to this RPC client.c for this information. All right. So when the disconnect happens, RPC client transfer. So this is the notify function. This is how it actually gets the RPC CLNT disconnect into the client translator. Once this is done, it will set up a reconnection timer and it will do a reconnect. Okay. So every 3 seconds, it will call a reconnect, RPC CLNT reconnect. So it will use a timer event. It will, after 3 seconds, it will call this RPC CLNT reconnect. We can check what is happening in this RPC CLNT reconnect also. It will oh, wait a second. It will if it is not disabled, it will call this one. Okay, there is supposed to be a connect call somewhere, and yeah, here. Okay, so it will try to call this one. Okay, it will, like every 3 seconds, it will always call this RPC transport connect, which actually tries to make the socket connection. And it will also set up this timer, reconnect timer. So it will again, which will be called after 3 seconds. So the way it works is, if the connection succeeds, it will cancel the reconnect timer, and that's it. You will just get an RPC CLNT. So it will call this one, RPC CLNT node. It will call this thing if there is a connection that is successful. Otherwise, this will keep on looping. Every 3 seconds, it will try to make a connection. So this is what you had the doubt, right, Arvinda?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so this is what happens on the disconnect. On the client side, we will also look at what happens on the server side, which again is server RPC notify. So what happens in this is, like, this RPC SVC event disconnect gets triggered. Just like we have RPC CLNT, which handles the client part of the communication. There is an RPC SVC, which handles the communication on the server side. Anyway, so it basically tries to figure out, because there could be so many clients that are connected to the same port. It tries to figure out the actual client. I think it gets, where is it getting this client from? Oh yeah, it is part of this transport private. So yeah, it doesn't need to look up anywhere. It is already there in that structure. So it will do the connection cleanup. So in the connection cleanup, you can see, it has this way of telling what all things that it needs to clean up. By default, all the FDs get cleaned up and they get closed. If there are internal logs, the GF client disconnect gets called. This one I'll talk about in some time. But for all the FDs that are open on this transport, it will send a, it will do an FD cleanup. FD cleanup will actually first do a flush on this. Yeah, so it will do a flush on the FD to clean up any of the POSIX logs. And also before any FD gets closed, we generally get a flush. So it also is there for that reason. And then it will, once the FD is closed, the resources that are related to that FD, like the entry in the FD table, etc., all of these things will get cleaned up. So that is one more thing that happens in the server. So yeah, so these are the things that happen on the server. Right. Okay. So now we will look at client underscore T in brief. The reconnection part is pretty simple. Maybe we'll just look at the reconnection part in like 3-4 minutes, and we can come back to this client underscore T part again. So as I was mentioning before, every 3 seconds there will be an attempt to do a connect, and once the connection, the server translator is up, I mean the machine and the process and server translator, all of them are set up properly, the reconnect will be successful. It again is the same code path. You basically get this RPC CLNT connect. It first connects to the actually the reconnection keeps happening to the cluster D on that machine. So once the connection happens, it again tries to get the port information from the cluster D for that brick, and then it will do a connect. So the only change that is there for this is the one second, where is this client query port map? Yeah, so in this there is a the client ID will have the set vol count. So every time a set volume is successful, this thing gets incremented. This is to make sure that the connection ID is unique per client translator. So it needs to keep giving a separate ID so that the client underscore T that gets allocated to you is different upon reconnection. Okay, so this is the only thing that gets that is different in the reconnection path. Everything else is same. The other thing that is different is when disconnection happened, we marked all the FDs bad. Upon reconnect, it has to reopen these FDs. We will look at that one. Okay, post and ship. Yeah, so this is the part where it will go over all the FDs that are marked bad. It will get that list of all the FDs that need to be reopened. And for all of them, if it is also based on the FOP version, it will either call reopen V2 or reopen the older one. If it is a directory, it will be reopened there. Otherwise, it will be reopened file. So the fob that gets sent over is either open dir or an open. And once all these FDs are open, you mark the FD with the whatever is the number that gets returned by the server translator. So that's what happens in the reconnect path. Any doubts here, Arvinda? Because I went a bit fast so that IP can cover client underscore T in a bit more detail.
No, Pranita, I'm good.
Oh, good, right? Okay, so now we'll look at the client underscore T server, structure. So this is actually similar. Just like you have the inode table, etc., you have something called as a client table, where all the clients that are there get stored. So these are for making sure that we maintain the ref counts. But the important parts are these, like the client underscore UID and client underscore name. So these these actually have the information like which machine, which process, it will have PID, what is the set volume count, etc. So that we can, if there are any blocked logs or etc., if there are any bugs, we can figure out which client sent these things and try to figure out what is the reason why all these things have come. It also has these auth related information that is used at the time of set volume. This is what gets used to disconnect if there is any problem, if we change auth allow auth deny. This structure will be useful to figure out if this client translator, this client is still a valid client. Apart from that, the other things are, there is a concept of subdirectory mount in Fuse. So if that is the deal, this also will be populated. And these are all related to that basically. Which directory, what is the GFID and I know path, the subdir mount is a path. And the FD count is the this is again used for cleanup purposes when we do a detached brick. Detached brick is an operation that is used in brick multiplex, which we are not covering now. But probably with GLUSD we can cover it. So, but this is the client structure. We have client get and client put. So there is a client entry table, which I think, let's see what this is. I think this is an array. It's an array list, I think. It's an array list implementation. Yeah, it's an array list implementation of the clients. So every time it hits a max number of clients, I think it increases the number of clients, and it's basically a array list. After this, so when you do a client get, it will put this new client into this client table, and this is similar to that of like FD table that we have. I think that also is based on array list. So it's the same thing. In client put, the reverse happens. So it will, so basically it will maintain these references and all of that for cleanup purposes, but like put actually removes it from the client get creates it, client put actually removes it. The nomenclature could be a little bit confusing though. But the other things that are important about client underscore T is just like we have this, for example, in inode dots, say, so this inode, forget maybe. Forget me. Okay. So just like we have the accelerator callbacks, which will be called for releasing the resources on like these two are for FD closing. This is for inode getting destroyed. All the information that is related to these resources will be forgotten by the translators. Something similar is also present for this client underscore key. One such translator which maintains state per client is logs translator. So CB case in accelerator CB case in client transfer, sorry, in logs translator will have these two. So upon receiving a disconnect from the client, it will clean up all the inode LKs, entry LKs, and meta LKs that are present. The POSIX logs are cleared by the flush operation by server translator. So that may not happen here. Then there is a, yeah, so this is like a safe measure, I think. So it also calls the disconnect event for destroy. And then the whatever is the context that we store for this accelerator on the client, we will delete that one also. So this is one more resource that gets managed in all of the accelerators that need it. At the moment, only server translator, I think, has this one. We can probably check this one out. Okay. I don't think any other one. Okay, client underscore T. Oh, okay. IO threads also seems to handle something in disconnect. Even U-time translator also is doing something. Leases also similar. Whenever a client disconnect happens, if there is something that needs to be done, these are the translators that are doing something or the other. So that is one more point that we wanted to cover in this session. So yeah, this is client underscore T. This is just like any other resource in in the graph. Yeah, so I think these are the things that I wanted to cover in this. Yeah, that's it. I think we covered all of the slides that we wanted to cover. Arvinda, are there any other doubts you have?
No problem.
Okay. All right. I'll stop the presentation.